Hyperinflation, record profits, violence on the streets. Are you beginning to think that the world is falling apart in spite of us being promised that the end of the pandemic would be building back better? But are we building back worse, sir? Hello there, you 5.7 million awakening wonders. Well done for staying true to yourself in the face of so much opposition. People saying you're crazy, people saying you're a conspiracy theorist, people saying you're some chicken legs all tied up with twine. It's the last bunch that I hate most of all. It doesn't even make sense, that accusation. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, subscribe to it right now so that you're regularly informed of the content that we make every single day on this platform, with our agenda to critique mainstream media, to expose government corruption, and to show where big business has more influence than ordinary people when it comes to political outcomes. I know you know that already. I read your comments. That's why it's important that you comment right now. Is it becoming apparent to you that the world is at some peculiar turning point? Are we on the precipice of end times? Is this some kind of apocalyptic unveiling of deeper truths? Everywhere I look, I read about hyperinflation, war. There are riots in America. There are strikes in the UK. There's continual lies. There's doddery old presidents. And even when it comes to an issue like those people doing sit down in the road protests all dressed up in high vis, can you not see the reasonable arguments on both sides? Some people concerned about the state of the planet, seems like a reasonable concern to me, and some people want to get on with their lives, and yet people can't unite because both sides, particularly the people sitting down on the road, are bloody annoying.
Senza usare la violenza, per favore. Però scusate.
He seems like he's got experience in doing that bloke, doesn't he? He really dragged that fella like a sack of spuds. When you take an issue just like that, where you see the fissures in society, it becomes obvious that things aren't working. No one's presenting us with a viable vision. No one's saying society's falling apart, we've just endured a peculiar pandemic as a country, we emulated a Chinese model that's built, it seems to a degree now, on lies, inefficiency, deception. We're advancing towards a technocracy, a cadre of experts advising how society should be organised, rather than the democracy that we've all been promised. There seems to be a digital dictatorship forming around us, social credit scores being presented, measures that were taken during COVID simply not being peeled back, and no one is offering us a vision of how we might live differently, how you might collectivise in your community, run your own schools, hospitals, run your own lives. What we are seeing instead is ordinary people brawling in the streets, dragging each other around like bags of potatoes, and yet what we would see as a problem is not a problem to the most powerful interests in the world. For the most powerful interests in the world, things are working just fine.
Overnight chaos and panic in the streets of D.C. after gunfire erupted at a packed Juneteenth concert and festival.
I suppose it's easy to create images of disarray, and perhaps this would have been possible at any time in history. But you tell me how you feel after this pandemic, after this period of lockdown, at the height of summer, in a seasonal transition, to feel things aren't right. This could be a very peculiar summertime we're about to enter into.
Disruption has lingered as the industry struggles with the surge in Sunseekers post-pandemic. Problems with the baggage system at Terminal 2 over the weekend left hundreds waiting for 3 hours to collect their luggage.
Have you noticed in general that American news is much better than British news? I'm not talking about the content, I'm talking about the style. British news, oh, I was kept for an hour and a half at Heathrow, it's chaos on streets. Oh, blimey, when's the plane coming? American news, woo, Godzilla's coming. And you might think, oh, that's just because of the subject. It's much more glamorous topics. But look at this. Even when they're talking about breakfast cereal, it's more exciting.
If you feel like there's a little less cereal in your box these days...
I do feel like there's a little less cereal in my box these days.
It's not your imagination. It's actually called shrinkflation, when products get smaller, but the prices stay the same.
In my opinion, what underwrites all these apparent chaotic and disconnected events is the economic ideology that holds our society together while simultaneously cleaving apart. Listen to this. A new paper published Tuesday shows that US corporate price markups and profits surged to their highest levels since the 1950s last year, bolstering arguments for an excess profits tax as a way to rein in sky-high inflation. Profit means excess already, so an excess profit is a way of saying profit. Authored by Mike Konzel and Nico Luziani of the Roosevelt Institute, the analysis finds that markups, the difference between the actual cost of a good or service and the selling price, were both the highest level on record and the largest one-year increase in 2021. I will just point out, I know a lot of you are into free market and big business and all that kind of stuff, and I don't mind. I've told you many times, I don't mind what you believe in. But this is at odds with the narrative we're being told. Is it Putin's price hikes or is it profiteering? Are these apparent crises events being used to create opportunities to generate power or profit? And let me know if you recognise that template from anywhere else in the last couple of years. In their new brief, Consal and Luciani note that higher markups don't always mean larger profits, but they did in 2021, the researchers write, showing that the net profit margins of US firms jumped from an annual average of 5.5% between 1960 and 1980 to 9.5% in 2021, as companies pushed up prices, citing inflationary pressures across the global economy as their justification. As people feel the squeeze, as simple things like gas and fuel and basic goods become more expensive, there is a pressure in our collective psyche and in our individual lives. Remember, we've been palliated and soothed by consumer goods for a long while. Our true ideology is consumerism. You might be a conservative, you might be a Catholic, you might be a Muslim, you might be a progressive gay person, you might be ultra traditional, cis, straight, whatever language suits you. But you will be a consumer if you live in one of these countries. That is the way that you live. You can tell yourself whatever you want to tell yourself about your identity. I truly believe they don't care a jot about that. What they care about is your dollar bills and your pound notes, and they can control you using that. This is our true ideology. And note that at this time of apparent crisis, the most powerful interests in the world are benefiting. So if the most powerful interests in the world, which means the people with the most influence, are benefiting, then how is it a crisis at all? And how would we ever end it? How high companies can increase their sales up and above their costs matter for the economy more generally, because these markups distribute economic gains from workers and consumers to firms and shareholders, said Luciani. This is especially the case when almost 100% of these firms' earnings derived from markups are distributed upwards to shareholders rather than retained and reinvested. I can't tell you how much of your individual and personal reality is impacted by that ideology, that profits gained go upwards. They don't re-enter the community. They're not redistributed. They're not affecting and improving the lives of ordinary people. They are being siphoned. You know that the pandemic was the biggest wealth transfer in history. Well, that now has to be sustained. Some people believe that a lot of social engineering took place in the last couple of years to create crises, to introduce new regulation, to create profit for certain interests. Well, that trend is continuing. Let me know in the comments below if you think that's what's happening. The new research comes as the White House struggles to formulate a coherent and effective response to an inflation surge that has become a serious economic and political problem, particularly as the pivotal 2022 midterms approach. Because they're unable to address this economic problem because of their devotion and alliances with their donors, they have to instead create phony opponents. Oh, it's still Donald Trump. He's over there somewhere causing some aggro. Oh, it's Putin. It's COVID. It's something. It's stuff that we can't control. Why don't you tell us this before we elected you, that you can't control anything? Because then we would have elected somebody else. Survey data shows that US voters, including those in key battleground states, overwhelmingly want the Biden administration to challenge corporate power and support a windfall profits tax to counter soaring prices at grocery stores, gas stations, and elsewhere across the economy. How can you not have politicians that advocate for measures that improve the lives of ordinary people of all political persuasions? How can you not? Because you don't have the ability to do that, because you are the puppets of powerful corporate interests. You are the plaything of the dominator Goliaths of globalist elites. Yeah, but surely this is just a one-off. No, it's not a one-off, is it? Because another example, straight off the top of my head, is that voters wanted the government to control price gouging when it comes to pharmaceutical products, pharmaceuticals and drugs generally. And that was promised pre-election. Where is it? Another promise not delivered on. And you know why? Do you need me to tie these things together? Of course you don't. It's you that tells me how these things work. The government works for Big Pharma. Big Pharma is regulated by the FDA. The FDA is funded by Big Pharma. How long is it going to be before we start to put these dots together to recognize that we're being ushered into a new era where we have no control over our ordinary lives, and the mainstream media are standing by and allowing it to happen, drawing our attention to issues that are beyond us, creating more fragmentation and opposition between people who should be seeking alliance? Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, who is leading an effort to damp down inflation by aggressively hiking interest rates, has also cited modest wage increases over the past 2 years as a factor behind rising inflation, expressing his desire to get wages down despite evidence that wage growth has slowed in recent months. I tell you the problem is, it's Ordinary people. They're the people that need to be penalised. People with barely any money. If we can just control them, what about all this money that's been funneled off into the wealthiest enclaves of society? Leave that. Leave that alone. That'll trickle down in the end. Well, what? There it comes. Look. Oh no, it disappeared. It turned into vapour. Gonzalo and Luciani contend in their paper that changes to labour and worker compensation are not driving factors in recent markups. Such high profit margins also mean that there's room for wages to increase without necessarily raising prices, an important dynamic in a hot labour market. They've got to make magical arguments where profits are increasing significantly, but the problem is that there's high wages. It's become a kind of gerrymandering of information, just controlling which information you have access to ensure that you remain disempowered in a culture that is economically run and you have no access to economic forces or economic power. Also, this guy's the head of the Fed, so when faced with a choice whether to say, oh, the problem is big business and powerful corporations who we're in league with, or ordinary people who we can do what we like to, who's he going to choose every single time? How often have you seen individuals condemned and blamed for situations that are institutional? It happens again and again and again, whether it's the coronavirus pandemic, whether it's the opioid crisis, whether it's obesity, whether it's a mental health crisis. Individuals. We have to start looking at the centralized forces that create the power and create the influence that these situations are generated by. But let's just take them at their word. What's happened is ordinary people earning so much money in their ordinary lives, there's just no money left. You've got it all. So there won't be any money to spend anywhere else then? No, can't imagine there will be. The Senate Armed Services Committee voted Thursday to tack an additional $45 billion on top of President Joe Biden's already massive military spending request, bringing a total proposed budget for the coming fiscal year to a staggering $857 billion, the largest defense budget that America has ever seen. Let me stress that I think that any money that's spent making the lives of ordinary service people in America or any country in the world that are willing to give their lives over in the service of what they believe in, those people should be supported and well looked after. But if it's money that's ultimately getting funneled out into defense contracts and crazy little construction deals, which I have a sneaking suspicion it will be, I'm not behind that. Are you? Let me know in the comments below. The Pentagon have spent $14 trillion since 9/11. Up to half of it went to for-profit defense contractors. So you could almost say that the crisis of 9/11, which was a tragic event, was used to generate profit for defense contractors. There's the evidence there. So whatever crisis you're facing and wherever you stand on these divisive issues of culture and race and gender, remember that beneath it all is plain old economics. Remember that beneath it all you have a corrupt government, in this case a Democratic government or a Democrat Party government supported by big business that they will not regulate because they're funded by them and lobbied by them. You have a mainstream media that simply will not tell you the truth but will continue to focus on issues that are divisive and cause cultural conflagration, and you have big business profiting from all of it and sending that money upstairs. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think. What you think is so much more important than what I think. Let me know in the comments below how you think inflation is being exploited, how you think resources are being controlled, how you think that you are being lied to. Let's keep this conversation polite, lively and smart. I know you can do it. Give us a thumbs up. If you don't subscribe yet, subscribe right now. We need every single one of you subscribing, and turn on your notification bell so we can remain in continual contact with you, because sometimes the algorithm don't do what it should. I need you to watch the videos that we upload every single day because they are of vital importance to our continuing mutual advancement. If you enjoyed this video, have a look at either of these and please sign up to my mailing list right now so I can tell you about live online events and live in-person events that we do the whole time. More important than any of that, please stay free.